So what does cooking have to do with recovery? Well, maybe not a lot, or maybe there are some lessons there that I can pass along. I thought I'd share with you one of my passions in this video. I love to cook. In fact, I look on cooking as a therapeutic activity. After a long day in the office, I may come home not only tired, but with a significant amount of anxiety over how my clients are doing or not doing. And I don't want to think about doing anything or being anywhere or having to keep any kind of schedule. So what do I do to relax? Well, you guessed it, I cook. Sometimes I have a recipe in mind, and other times I just create. You know, there's some things that are always in my kitchen. I always have several sweet large onions, and I always have garlic. And if I have those basic ingredients when I'm in a pinch, I can usually find enough things in the pantry or in the freezer to put together and make a meal. Onions and garlics are givens in my kitchen. In recovery, there are also some givens. Givens like you need to go to meetings, you need to get a sponsor, you need to work the steps of recovery. And with these basic ingredients of recovery, you can put together your own recovery plan and navigate the waters of recovery. So stay with me. We're not going to have a 12-step meeting here on this video, but we are going to have some fun. At least I'm going to have some fun because I'm the one that gets to do the cooking. One of the things that I love to cook is Italian food. And for years I've worked on recipes to perfect them. And some of them still need some work. Well, that's probably being too generous. Some of them need more than a bit of work. But there are two that I believe are pretty close to the way I want them. Though, in truth, I still make some minor modifications just about every time that I cook. We're going to have some friends over tonight, so I'm going to make my pasta sauce and meatballs. And I thought I'd share the recipe with you and, along the way, talk about recovery just a bit. Well, first, I need to get some music going. I always like to have music playing when I'm cooking, and the music needs to be in keeping with the theme of the evening. So, just a minute. Let me go get something going. This is Italian, so maybe some Italian dinner music. I'll be right back. Let's find some music here. Yes, Italian playlist. See if we can find something that sets the stage for tonight. Maybe let's do something else. All right. Now, if I was by myself right now cooking, I would be turning the music up considerably louder. But I'll turn it down so that hopefully you'll be able to hear me, and we can still get a little bit of the ambiance that I need while I'm cooking. All right. So let me get started. Since I'm doing something with tomatoes and tomato sauce, I really need to make sure that I don't get any splatters because I'm likely to get some splatters. First thing I want to do is to put on the pasta sauce. And the pasta sauce is pretty standard. All of the typical ingredients you are used to seeing in a pasta sauce, certainly tomatoes, and there'll be olive oil and garlic and onion. But there's a couple of things that you may not find in many other recipes. And I think these are the things that make this a special dish for me. So I'm going to start with some onion. I'll saute an onion. And one of the secrets of my pasta sauce is garlic. Lots of garlic. Don't be afraid of it. I'll use a whole head, sometimes a head and a half, maybe 2 heads of garlic. That's not 1 or 2 cloves. That's the entire head. Half a dozen Roma tomatoes, and, well, in the seasoning. So we'll get started and see where it goes. So I'll start with an onion. A lot of times I'll use several onions, maybe 3 or 4 onions, depending on what I'm making or how big of a pot. For this, there's 7 of us eating tonight, so I think just 1 medium-sized yellow onion, and I always use the sweet onions. Just enjoy the taste of them. Adds a little something extra to the sauce. And when I get the onion done, then we'll get started on the garlic. I know that a lot of times with the garlic, recipes will call for 1 or 2 cloves of garlic, or maybe 3 or 4 cloves of garlic. I like to use a lot of garlic. The secret, though, is if you're going to use garlic, if you're going to use a lot of it, make sure that the garlic has had time to cook, that it's well assimilated into the rest of the ingredients. That one looks beautiful. And I'll go ahead and I'll peel the garlic, and then we'll be back and get on with the next step. All right, I've got the garlic peeled, but we'll wait on that for a little bit. I'm going to put about a 1/4 cup of olive oil in the pan and bring it to about a medium heat. If I follow a recipe, I will get predictable results. And that's the way it is with recovery. If you just follow the recipe, do the basics, don't cut corners, don't take shortcuts. Do what those who have gone before you tell you to do. And if you do, you'll find that recovery will work for you the way it's worked for millions of others. So while the onion is sauteing, I'm going to go ahead and cut the Roma tomatoes. It's not tomato season, so they're not as beautiful as the ones that I would typically like to use with this. But in this sauce, they're going to work very well. They'll work well because I put 2 large cans of crushed tomatoes, and then add to that a very about a 10 to 12 ounce can of tomato sauce. And the tomato sauce, that's a lot more tomato sauce than a lot of recipes call for, but that much tomato sauce will help us have a lot thicker sauce. So I'm going to add the tomatoes in right with the onion and let that continue to saute until the tomatoes are pretty well cooked down, and then we'll add the rest of our ingredients. All right, the tomatoes and onions are looking good, and so now I want to add the tomato sauce and the crushed tomatoes. You know, I realize there's a lot easier way of making a pasta sauce just using only the canned products. However, the fresh Roma tomatoes, it adds that little extra kick, that extra bit of fresh taste that really makes this an unforgettable pasta sauce. So I'll just go ahead and add the whole can. And then the crushed tomatoes. And this recipe can be expanded easily to take care of a number of additional guests. The interesting thing is that when I cook this, even if it's just my wife and I that are eating, I go ahead and usually cook at least this much because we like the leftovers. All right, now I want to add the garlic to this. Oh yeah, that's looking nice. And for the garlic, I like using a garlic press. You can mince it if you like, and would make the garlic press, I think, just makes it significantly quicker, and I don't think it affects the flavor one way or the other. So let me get the garlic in, and then we'll come back and finish the pasta. All right, so garlic is in, and make sure you cook this thoroughly. There's a lot of garlic in it. As long as it's cooked thoroughly, you'll have this wonderful garlic flavor in every bite, but it won't be pungent and bitter like it would be if you didn't cook it thoroughly. Held back a couple of cloves for the garlic bread later. Now, time to do a little seasoning, a little sea salt, and I'll probably come back later, taste it, and add some more, a little fresh ground pepper. And now, something that I've been doing the last couple of years that has served me pretty well is, instead of doing each of my spices individually, measuring out the oregano and the rosemary, the thyme, and parsley, I use a Italian seasoning blend, and about 2 tablespoons. I always hear Scarborough Fair playing in the background when I think of this, you know, parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. Anyway, I'm not going to sing it for you. Something else that I do sometimes, I will add, I'll add mushrooms. You can add Parmesan cheese. You can add parsley. Some people like that. The thing that I enjoy most, if I'm going to add any other spice at this point, would be to add some fresh basil and chop that up fine. Then a purely optional ingredient is to add about a half a bottle of a good quality Chianti. And again, you don't have to add this, but I think that it really makes the flavor richer, and the color is just beautiful after this is simmered for several hours. All right, get that stirred up, and we'll let that cook for a bit. And now I think it's time to start the meatballs. All right, and the sauce will continue to simmer here for, probably about an hour and a half, 2 hours before I put the meatballs in the oven. But I'm going to go ahead and make the meatballs now. You know, there's another recovery lesson here in cooking pasta sauce, and that is, it takes time. It does not happen quickly. You know, the reality is you can get sober quickly. You can learn to stop your acting out, all of it, and stay that way permanently. But the life lessons that you learn in recovery, they come slowly. The change in thought patterns that back up the new behavior patterns you have, those come slowly. All right, for the meatballs, first of all, I'm going to start with a couple of eggs and put those right here in the mixing bowl. Probably some of our friends calling to see what time they're supposed to come tonight. I'll beat these just lightly. You don't have to completely whisk them in. And then I'm going to add some fresh ground veal, the leanest fresh ground beef that I could find. And I use hot Italian sausage, and when I can get it like this, not in a casing, it sure makes preparation significantly quicker. So I've got about a pound of each of these, and I'll add that. Then add the veal. That's beautiful. And the ground beef. It's about 97%. All of those, both the veal and the beef, were both ground today. And then some Italian breadcrumbs. And I add about a cup. And let me get some parsley. I like to put in some fresh chopped parsley. So the parsley is, oh yeah, this is nice. The parsley adds more color and interest than anything else. I don't know if you didn't have the parsley in it, if you could tell the difference. I've never made it without the parsley. So, and I typically put in about 3 tablespoons full. And now the one ingredient that you may not see in other meatball recipes, but I think this is the thing that makes the difference. Ricotta cheese. And what I like to use is the fat-free ricotta, just to make it a little bit more of a healthy recipe. And I'm going to put about a cup. Now add a few more seasonings to it. A little more of the Italian seasoning, the combination, the blend. A little sea salt. And then I'm going to add some fresh ground pepper. All right, for this, you got to get your hands dirty. If I were to put this in the oven like it is, there's no meatballs. It's just a mess. And you know, so it is with recovery. Recovery, you can't just say, well, I've been to a couple of meetings and I bought a book and I've seen a therapist and I've got a sponsor. You've got to do the work. You've got to be willing to put your hands in, and the work comes from doing step work. And that comes slowly. Occasionally people will ask me, how long does it take to work the steps? And you know, there's no one right or wrong answer to that. And the first thing I tell them to do is talk to your sponsor. Ask your sponsor how long it takes to work the steps. And probably what the sponsor is going to say is it's different for every person. And it really depends on how much work you're willing to put into it. For a rule of thumb, what I like to think about is that if there are 12 steps and 12 months, why not aim at doing a step a month? Now some steps, like the first, maybe the fourth, and then when you get to the amends process, number 8 and 9, those will take a bit longer. But then there's other steps that, depending on your sponsor and the work that you're doing, may be as quick as a single meeting. All right, let me get out a cookie sheet and wash my hands, and we'll get started making the meatballs. All right, for the meatballs, I use a small to medium size melon scoop or a cookie scoop, and find that to be a pretty good size meatball. And this will probably make somewhere between 40 and 60 meatballs. And something else I do with my meatballs, you know, for years I would cook them on the stove. I would fry them. Not anymore. Cook them in the oven, put them on a cookie sheet, and you can see I'm putting them pretty tight up against each other. And I tell you, the scoop sure makes it a lot quicker. Quicker way to make the meatballs. And I'll put them up right next to one another. And then once I get this done, I'll put them in the oven, and then we'll check on the sauce. I'll be right back. All right, the meatballs are ready to go in the oven, and looks like it made just less than 40 with that medium size cookie scoop. When I use a small cookie scoop, it will make about 60 meatballs. Now I'm going to put this in the oven at 350 for about 35 minutes. And before I do that, I want to check the sauce and see how it's doing. Oh yeah, it's looking fine. And I want to taste it a bit. It is going to be wonderful. Let me get the meatballs in. Well, now it's time for the last two ingredients for our pasta sauce. It's been simmering now for about 2 hours, and these are things you may or may not have seen in a pasta sauce before. The first, about a tablespoon of sugar. Don't overdo it. It's easy to put too much. And then the last thing is about a half of a tablespoon of baking soda. Baking soda changes the pH. It lowers the acidity of the tomatoes enough, and now it's really just bubbling away as I mix that in. But it changes the pH enough that it's a whole different pasta sauce as a result. And I'm going to let this simmer for about another hour, and before that hour is up, the meatballs will be out of the oven and we'll be adding them to the sauce. So those last two ingredients, those are the things that make a difference in my pasta sauce. When you go to recovery and you see someone who's doing very well in recovery, I think it'd be a good idea to get alongside them and just say, hey, what makes the difference in your recovery? What is it that you're doing that's different from other people? You know, there may be a little something that they can tell you that will help. For example, recently a man that was asked that, he said, when I started recovery, somebody said I ought to do a 90-90. I ought to do 90 meetings in 90 days. And at the end of that 90 days, I thought, this served me pretty well. He said, it's been about 9 months now, and I still make one meeting a day, every day. If I miss a day, then I make up and I do 2 the next day. If I'm out of town and I can't find a meeting, I do a telephone meeting. Find others who are doing well in recovery and say, what are those added ingredients that make your recovery different from others? All right, we'll let this simmer a bit longer. Already the consistency really is changing. Let me get a camera over here to show you. You can see it a bit darker brown there. That's where the baking soda was still not mixed in completely. But I'll let that simmer now. You see it bubbling just a bit more. We'll let that simmer, and we'll come back in about a half an hour when the meatballs are ready and add them to the sauce. All right, I've already checked on the meatballs and they look really good. In fact, we can do one of two things at this point. They've cooked a little bit longer than I typically cook them, probably about 40 minutes. Now I could either turn them over right now and cook them a bit longer, or what I'm going to do is add them to the sauce so they can finish their cooking in there. And then I'll let them, they'll probably cook another 30 minutes. The sauce has been on about 2.5 hours now. And so cooking the sauce, simmering it for a total of about 3 hours is what I look for. It's a pretty good target. And if it were to be able to simmer for as long as 4 hours, then that time would be well spent. So the sauce and meatballs have been cooking together for the last half an hour, and the sauce has been cooking for a little over 3 hours. Doesn't that look good? I wish you could smell it. The garlic just really fills my nostrils right now. And you see there's a half a pot full, so it'll easily feed the 7 guests that we have tonight, and we'll have a bit left over as well. While the pasta sauce has been simmering, I've been chopping vegetables for the salad, and I have some asparagus tops, carrots, cucumber, a little of everything, whatever I had in the refrigerator, green onions, bell pepper, red bell pepper, mushrooms, celery. We'll put that together. My wife has made a chocolate biscotti for dessert. Looking forward to that. And as you can see, the table is beautifully set. We're awaiting our guests. They should be arriving any moment. So since our guests are on the way, it's time for me to get out of my apron and get ready for their arrival. I appreciate you joining me in my hobby of cooking. Before I go, I want to ask you something. Do you have a hobby? Do you have some avocation that you've neglected as you've pursued your addiction? Maybe it's time to get that hobby back out and dust it off. Rather than acting out, why not pursue your hobby for a while today? And tonight, why not go to a 12-step meeting? I'm Dr. Milton Magnus, wishing you hope and freedom.